is a reason why the Cowboys want to leave the NFC East, and we own this division the last 23 years. There is a reason why we're going to win a ton of games this year. Forget the quarterback, forget the receivers. This is why we win.
Dallas still stinks.
Yo, by the way, Dingbat here, and hope everybody's having a great day. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're hanging in there. You know, there's a lot of talk about Jalen Hurts, the wide receivers, the running back. All those things are great, and they do mean something. But there is a reason why the Eagles are going to win a ton of games this year. There's a reason why we have been the most successful team in the division the last 23 years. Because it all starts in the trenches. And that's why I always look to get better. And if I could add somebody, I do it. Now, before we get into all of this, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that like button. More importantly, make sure you subscribe to the most censored, the most throttled, pause, Eagles content creator in all of the internet. And if you've been subscribed for a while, I just want to thank you so much for the support you give to me. Just do me one favor, though. Just make sure you're still subscribed and everything is good, because I'm getting a lot of people telling me a lot of weird things are going on with their subscribe thing. It happens every so often. So if you could double moonwalk check, make sure everything is good. Now, in this video, I want to talk about why the Eagles are going to win. Why is this team going to be very successful this year? And it's simple. You win football games because you win the trenches, okay? You have to have a good offensive line in this league. You have to have a good defensive line in this league. Think about the Eagles just a few years ago. Remember when we really didn't have very many weapons? You had Devontae Smith was a rookie. Jalen Hurts still had to work on his passing game. The Eagles were struggling early in the year. What did they do? They started to lean on their offensive line, started to run the ball, and they were able to get to the playoffs. Why? Because of the talent of their offensive defensive line. This is a very important factor in the NFL. This is really one of the most important things. You have to win in the trenches. It all starts in the trenches. That's why you're always going to see the Eagles pick defensive linemen, offensive linemen, high and early, because they're very, very important. And you can never, ever, ever have enough, okay? You can never have enough. Now, a few days ago, PFF, which, let me tell you, I don't really subscribe to a lot of the things that they say. A lot of the analytics stuff they use, I don't know. I think it's a little bit ridiculous sometimes. But every once in a while, I do agree. And in this case, I have to agree with them. PFF ranked the Eagles' offensive line number 1. They also ranked the Eagles' defensive line number 1. Okay, now, I don't think there's anybody close to the offensive line the Philadelphia Eagles have. I truly don't. I think the Eagles have the best offensive line. They have the best offensive line coach, and it's not even close. Defensive line, I think they have the best defensive line. But if you want to make an argument that 49ers are right up there with them, fine. They added Javon Hargrave. Okay, fine. However, the Eagles, their offensive line and defensive line are good. This means the Eagles are going to win a lot of games. If you look at the teams in their division, Washington, they have a good defensive line, horrible offensive line. Giants, I think both their lines could be better. Then you look at Dallas, their line's okay. I think their offensive line was better a few years ago. It's going downhill as far as I'm concerned. And their defensive line, they're all right. They're all right. But nobody is as good as the Philadelphia Eagles. And when you look at the offensive line, right, you're going to have you have Jordan Mailata, who turned out to be a great left tackle. Landon Dickerson, I believe, top 3 left guard in football, very underrated. Kelsey, Hall of Famer. Then you have Lane Johnson at right tackle. And then you got that right guard spot. If there's any one question on that line, it's that right guard spot. But here's the thing. Whoever you plug in at right guard, they're going between Kelsey and Lane Johnson. They're going to be okay. And Cam Jurgens, he's a high draft pick, very talented, and we got him for years to come. This offensive line is the best in football, best. And they're going to continue to go out and dominate. And listen, when you have that offensive line, then you add a top quarterback like Jalen Hurts, and you add top wide receivers like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and a tight end like Goddard, and the running game they have. When you start adding those things, you don't just win a lot of games, you win championships. You go to Super Bowls. All right, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They're going to the Super Bowl again. All right, this is a great offense. The offensive line, I've said this before, is not only underrated, in my opinion, every year, but I think, even at one, they're still underrated, because I think this is one of the better offensive lines we've seen in years. In years. I really would put them up there with the 80 Hogs, 90 Cowboys. What the Eagles have to do is they have to go out and finish it now and win a championship to get that recognition. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, Eagles had 70 sacks last year. They blitzed like 9% of the time, still had 70 sacks. I mean, they're ultra talented in the pass rush. And yes, they lost Javon Hargrave, but you added Jalen Carter, to replace him. You're talking about maybe the best player in the draft, most talented at defensive tackle coming in. You have another first-round pick in Jordan Davis. Josh Sweat, double-digit sacks. Brandon Graham coming off his best year, double-digit sacks. Then you have Hassan Reddick, double-digit sacks. All right, check this out real quick. James Nagels wrote this: pound Eagles defensive lineman under contract for at least the next 2 years. This is the Eagles defensive line that is around for at least 2 more years. It's unbelievable. Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, both guys double-digit sacks, going nowhere. Jordan Davis, first-round pick. He's going to have a big year this year, by the way. Jalen Carter. I mean, perhaps the best player in the draft. Nolan Smith, a steal. Milton Williams, a guy who has been a rotational piece that I like more and more. These guys are all under contract the next 2 years at least, and more. But, I mean, that's a lot of talent that you're going to have the next 2 years on your defensive line. This is why the Eagles win. Okay, now they want to say, well, the Eagles have the worst linebacking core in the National Football League. They got a young core. I think Nakobe Dean's going to be good. I think Morrow's going to be good. But a lot of the linebackers' success is going to be helped by this defensive line. This defensive line in front of those linebackers are going to help them a lot. Philly has more talent locked up on the defensive line than most teams have on their entire defense. I mean, that is great. That is great. And that leads me to one other thing, okay? The Eagles' offensive line, great. Their defensive line, great. Does that mean we should rest on our laurels and say, you know what? We got everybody we need. Let's just go out and play. No. If you can even make it better, make it better. There is nothing wrong with making your strengths better. Make them better. All right? Now, there was an interesting article in ESPN, and what it was one last player each team could add, and it went through every team and that one player that they could add. And it was done by Field Yates, and basically, it was insider predicts Eagles making a, quote, greedy move for a Pro Bowler. Now, what I love so much about this was it was a guy that I have been talking about for a long time. It was Yannick Ngakoue. It was saying the Eagles could make a move and a play for Yannick Ngakoue. And to me, here's the thing. We have the best offensive line in football. We have the best defensive line in football. But if you could go out and actually make it better and add more depth, why wouldn't you do that? I don't understand. Always make your strength stronger when you can. This is what Field Yates said about this. He says, I know the Eagles have a premier pass rush and use their second first-round pick on Nolan Smith to further that. But let's get greedy as it pertains to a top Super Bowl contender. Waves of depth are essential for a pass rush in the NFL. And Ngakoue is a sack specialist who could provide Philly what it felt Robert Quinn would bring when it acquired him last offseason. Ngakoue won't exactly come cheap, but do you think I'm worried about the Eagles finding a way to make a move work under the salary cap? He has 9.5 sacks and 29 pressures last season with the Colts. And he's 28 years old. To me, if you could do this, you absolutely do it. And I think he points out something very interesting that I didn't think about. They really did that with Robert Quinn last year. They really brought Robert Quinn to be that sack specialist. Why not get him and bring him in if you can? And I would say this: get him to more than 1 year. Don't sign him to a 1 year deal. Sign him to like a 3 year deal, 4 year deal, because you are losing Fletcher Cox next year, and you could potentially lose Brandon Graham, although I hope we don't. The issue with him is going to be what he's wanting money-wise, because Dov Kleeman put this a couple days ago. Update: free agent defensive end Yannick Ngakoue has been seeking a $8 to $10 million contract per Brad Biggs. Now, that ain't the most expensive, but it's more than most teams have right now. Worth noting, the Pound Broncos signed Frank Clark to $5.5 million, and Bills signed Leonard Floyd to $7 million, two lesser deals recently. To me, he's a little younger than both those guys, right? So $8 to $10 million. I think if you can get Yannick Ngakoue at around the $8 million price for like 3 years, you do it. You absolutely do it. I think the Eagles could make this actually work. I actually do. And like I said, you are going to lose Fletcher Cox most likely next year and Brandon Graham. You have a lot of guys coming back, but you can never have too much pass rushers. You can never have too many. So why not go out and do it? I really liked Field Yates' view on this. Yannick Ngakoue, I honestly, like, I've been between him and DeAndre Hopkins, right? You know, who to go out and get if you could get one guy. I'm back to leaning Yannick Ngakoue would be the number one choice. I just think if you can make your defensive line that much stronger, just do it. If you have guys that can constantly rotate in and be fresh, do it. Especially think about this. The Eagles are going to be winning a lot of games this year. They're going to be winning a lot of games. That means your defensive line is going to be in the fourth quarter, and they're going to have the opportunity to pin their ears back and just go out and get the quarterback. That's what Yannick Ngakoue does. And if he's coming in as their second wave of defensive linemen, why not do it if you can? It's not going to hurt anybody else. You can never have too many defensive linemen, and I actually agree with this article 100%. I would love to hear what you guys think about this article and what they said. There's been some interesting articles. There was another article I want to talk about later. It suggested 4 players that the Eagles should go out and get. A couple of them we haven't even talked about that I think would be interesting to talk about. We'll get into that later, though. In the meantime, Yannick Ngakoue is my number one choice that I think the Eagles should go out and should pursue. But at the end of the day, this is all about the offensive and defensive line. You win games because your offensive line and defensive line are good. When you have that, you're going to be competitive. You're going to win games. When you add the quarterback to that, the receivers, the tight end, and everything the Eagles have in their skill set to that offensive line, you're going to be Super Bowl contenders. You might win a Super Bowl. You just went to one. And I think that the linebacker situation defensively is not as bad as everybody thinks it's going to be, partly because that defensive line is going to help out those linebackers. Just my opinion. With that said, take care. Talk to you later. Of course, don't be a dingbat, and remember, it's how we vision. We're all just living in it. Sometimes, I think when I talk, I think like Mark Holmes just hears dogs barking. It's like, ruff, 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 mother humper. Because he don't hear anything I say. Like, you could send, he could watch a video. I could put a link in the description. And yet, somehow, Philly 500 doesn't want the Cowboys in the NFC East. It had nothing to do with me. This is your people. These are your writers. These are your fans talking about you guys need to leave the NFC East. It has nothing to do with me. I'm only commenting about how stupid that is, and that the only truthful reason why you would not want the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC East is because you can't beat the Eagles. Has nothing to do with miles. We have something called planes nowadays. I just flew 3,000 miles. I hate to fly you out to Mr. T, my ass. But I just flew 3,000 miles. It has nothing to do with the miles. They look at the Eagles roster and they say, we can't beat this team over the next 8 years. Let's leave the division. They're quitters. And it ain't me. It's your boys. Mark Holmes. Face it. You guys stink. Denzel Washington out.
Oh, God. No. I want to be like the Eagles.